Hey everyone, and welcome to today's live stream session, Punching Up with Steve Basilone. This is Nikki Coble. I'm the director of Catalyst Story Institute, and Steve is a writer, director, and producer best known for his work on the Goldbergs. He also currently has projects in development with Sony, Fox, and MGM, as well as potentially whatever product he just drank from. You never know. It could happen soon. Welcome, Steve.
Hi, gang. How are you?
Hey. If you're watching, we're so excited to have your questions. Feel free to drop them in the chat. If you want your picture and name to be present, those can just go through streamyard.com/Facebook to give permissions. But welcome. We're excited to see you. And we wanted to start off by asking, because you've worked on so many different rungs of the writer's room ladder, what's the most important lesson you've learned ascending those ranks?
I think mostly just to be nice and be prepared.
Yeah.
I think that's the thing. I've seen there is a varying degrees of talent all throughout any industry. And the same is true here. But I think the thing that the people who work the most consistently are incredibly talented, but they're also just like a nice, easy hang. They're fun. They're, in terms of a comedy room, they tend to be funny. Like I've worked with people who may not, be the best with story, or they may not, their drafts might be fine, but they, are just a delight to be around.
Yeah.
And I think that goes kind of further than anything. I think it's really just, you have to be, I think, such a crazy level of talent to be a dick and still keep working. And, this is not false humility. I don't think I'm that level of talent. So I do fine, but I'm not, it's also just more work to be a dick. So just be nice.
Yeah. Burns those calories, makes you more friends.
Yeah. I think that's really the biggest thing. There's definitely some people who I thought, earlier on in their career were like, you know what, you don't really know what you're not, this is not, the learning curve is not super high for you, but you're a delight to be around. And then, you see them years later and they get confidence and they still have made friends and they're, have jettisoned over other people's careers just because they've picked it up and they've continued to be nice.
Yeah, so it's such an intense.
It always goes a long way.
Absolutely. It's an intense process, and long hours if we're back in the room, or at least difficult via remote. Even in our timeline, if we're interrupting each other at all, I mean, that can just be stressful. So having a good sense of humor and just a sense of humility goes a long way.
Yeah, because the paradigm has shifted a little bit in the last couple of years, obviously, because Zoom and such. But ultimately, we'll get back to we already are, or were before the strike, rather. A lot of in-person stuff, and oftentimes, if I'm ever in the position to hire people, there's the one or two people that I know that I've known and worked with forever who are going to be like my first hires, and then after that, it's based on reputation, and it's also meeting them and like, do I want to be hanging out with you at like 11 o'clock on a Friday? If you're going to be spending this much time with somebody, you just want to make sure like they seem chill, that they're bringing something to the table, but more than anything, that they're just going to help you get to the next place, get to their, achieve your vision. And if you're on the other side, you just want to be like, this is your show. I want to, whether or not I think it's amazing or solid or not even that good, my job, if I get it, is to, help you make your job easier. Because, the job of a showrunner is fucking chaotic. It's stressful.
Yeah.
It's basically, depending on how big your show is, it's basically being the CEO of a, $50 million to $100 million company, in the course of 10, 12 months. So, it's stressful. There's a lot of different facets that you have to deal with, and you don't want to, the writer's room is where you're going to spend most of your time. So you don't want that to be stressful additionally. So you want that to be a place that is a place of solace, that is a place that is like a joy, that you can get decent shit done, and that allows you to, that doesn't eat into your time the rest of your day. So you can either see friends or family, or, devote the other of your 80-hour work week to, post and production and all that shit. So you want to just try to, your goal always be, especially when you're being hired by anybody, is to make their life easier.
Absolutely. That's great advice. And on many levels, I would say I'd follow that up with, we often refer to punching up in terms of surrounding yourself with collaborators that you admire. Who are those people in your tribe, and how does that impact the work? I know you just mentioned it in terms of, there's a core group of people that you always want around you. You've got a shorthand, and those people can anticipate where you're going, or you riff really well with them. Who are those people in your life, and how does that impact the work?
I think for me, it's a lot of people that I've worked with forever. There's a couple of people who are like new additions to that, but my first 2 or 3 reads, I just have like inner sanctum of, because it's a lot to get people to read something. I'm a slow reader, and also I don't love to do it. I will do it, carte blanche, like, for a couple of people on whatever project, you know what I mean? And I'll read multiple drafts, but for other people, I'm not gonna read multiple drafts. So you have to have your inner sanctum, and I have my 2 or 3 reads, and 2 of them are people that I went to college with that I've known for 20 plus years that are amongst my best friends. One is my old writing partner. One is a continual collaborator, and they're both, one is just great with story and also good with jokes. The other one is great with jokes and it just has a great business acumen. And I think how that makes your life better, I guess that was part of how does that impact your work? I think it's whenever I'm getting notes on something that I've written, I'm just looking for a continuity of notes. So if there are, for example, I wrote this screenplay a while ago that we're in the process of getting money for, and when I sent that to 3 people, there was little notes, but they were all kind of different. One was talking about the mystery part, the other part was talking about the emotional part, another part was talking about some character stuff. So we all had validity, but there was not one particular one that felt like everybody was not pointing to one thing, because people are always going to have thoughts, right? But as long as you trust those people, I think that's really the most important, just like having, a core group of people that you can trust. But you want to, if everybody's pointing to the same thing, even if you don't like it, you should dig in and look at it. But if everybody's pointing to different things, then I think that's kind of a good thing, because then you can like pick and choose what makes sense to you, but not everybody is saying this is a problem, So as much as it's hard when some people, 2 or 3 people, give you the same kind of thought or the same area, and you may not like it, but you should probably look at it. But if everybody's saying something different, then that's okay. If you trust them, like, look into what you think makes the most sense. Trust your own instincts and kind of move on. But how impact the work? I think it just makes it stronger and better. Having people that you think are funnier than you or smarter than you or, better at story than you causes you to, it's like a sea biscuit. You run a little faster, make it, you try to catch up, and also it just makes it more attainable. And then, subsequently the inverse, you make their shit better. And you're also just like kind of forming this little, a company of actors, a team of people that you can just always kind of work with, I think it's good. It's good. It's like a writer's workshop. It's the Algonquin Hotel for like Hemingway and shit. It's just like being around like-minded people who are working on other things, and it makes it seem more attainable. When somebody else gets something, you're always gonna have a little bit of jealousy, but it's like, all right, cool, I want that, and I can do that because I feel like I have the same skill set as them. And also, you help each other, you lift each other up. I think it's just really good to have a community of people that you trust. So it impacts the work by making you better and hopefully them better. And in the long run, you support each other and give each other jobs when one of you's not doing so good, the other person is doing all right, so they can help you out.
Yeah, and I think that's key on a few levels too, in terms of once you've committed to that core group of people that I'm giving you feedback, you're giving me feedback, we're all invested, we're in the boat together. And like you said, we hope that if you're rising, I'm rising, and the other way around, right? We can help each other in that realm. But also having that core group means that those people know what I consider your tells. Like, oh, you're delving into shtick, you're following the joke, follow the story, whatever it is that is your normal thing that you do. They can hopefully gently or not, depending on who you are and how you receive your feedback, they can give it to you in a way to say, oh, you're doing that thing that you do, and I'm getting mine over here, which is cute, but have you earned it? Or you could earn it this way. And they can, at least I found that for me, where people can give me feedback through the lens of knowing me and knowing where my strengths are and knowing where my weaknesses are, and kind of not play into that, but just give me that nudge in the right direction without being devastating, right?
Yeah.
Where they're like,
Yeah.
this bumps me. I either need you to earn it or I need you to cut it. You're like, okay.
Yeah. And also, I think it's, years ago when I was doing an edit on this movie I made a while ago, I was working with some producers who we all had the same goal in line. We want to make it as good as possible, but there was several of them were people I was just working with for the first time, and there's a point in which it's good to stick to your guns, and there's another point in which diminishing returns, and you're just being stubborn for stubborn's sake. Mm-hmm. But there was a couple of times in which they were, pointing to a note, and I was like, we absolutely have to keep it. And then I'd show it to like a friend who I, known for 20 plus years, 30 years. And I'd be like, what do you think about this? Like, you don't really need it. I'm like, oh, all right. And then just kind of, because like I have faith and trust you in a way that I don't them. So it's being more protective in a way that's not being productive. Right. So sometimes it's good just to have those mirrors for people that can kind of like, you're being dumb. Stop being a stubborn little idiot.
Yeah, exactly. It's a great mirror, and it's a way to hold you accountable in a non-threatening way, because it's just they've known you since dirt, and that's just a long time, and they can cut right to it with a shorthand and just know that it's about the work at that point, which is great. What's your take on how the writer's room and the staffing process is changing now? The strike is obviously changing that conversation as well, but in recent years, how do you think that process is changing, and what's your take on that?
I think I haven't been like in the trenches, as it were, for the last 2.5 years. I've just been developing, so I haven't been on a show. I've done little stuff for friends here and there, but I haven't been on a show. I did like, a 12-year run or so of just being going from show to show. In the last 2.5 years, I've just been developing. So, I haven't seen it like firsthand as to how it's drastically changing, because I've just been sitting in my own chair, playing with my own toys. But I think the way it's changing is, some of the things, the paradigm is shifting in terms of streaming and in terms of just like network orders, just kind of not what they once were. I was on a show for many years that we had 24 episodes for like 5 years in a row, and it was exhausting. Mm-hmm. And those things just don't exist really anymore. So, because of that, I think, if you're only doing 8 episodes, sometimes you don't need, like, some of those rooms I was in were 12 people, right? And a lot of times you didn't maybe need all 12, but you needed 8 to 10, because when you're in the weeds and you got one person off on draft, and you've got another person on set, and you've got another person in editing, and somebody else is, whatever, sick, then 10 people quickly becomes 4. And that's when you start to, get a little worn thin. So I think because we've shifted away from those bigger orders, everybody's trying to make the most cost effective thing. And we can shake our fists at the man and like how kind of a callous way it is to run an artistic business. And just talking about, is it sustainable in terms of only having, exponential growth? Absolutely not. And especially if you're still being profitable. But everybody's trying to still make something that is good and that is cheap. So a lot of, because we're only doing less orders and there's less money reliant on, coming from ads, the rooms are smaller. So I think there's more content, there's more shows being created and run than ever, but there's also, they're smaller rooms for a lot of reasons. There's a trash truck by me, so fantastic, very glamorous. Yeah,
underscoring. Really nice. This is what I think about the current state. No, but I think
guys,
there's also
what you're looking forward to. This is Hollywood, baby. I'm in Sherman Oaks, the beautiful Sherman Oaks.
This could be you
being in a car.
Yeah, but I think like that's also part of it, is that if the rooms are shrinking, it's essential that if the rooms are shrinking, I think part of what the strike is about is that the ladder is getting people stuck on the same rung multiple times. Whereas you used to go from, a staff writer to a writer and more toward co-producer and things like that. If you're only getting 6 episodes, it's harder to level up. Would that be fair to say?
Yes, I think sometimes it's harder to level up. I mean, look, I think everybody has their own perspective. I think sometimes it's harder to level up, but I think the inverse is also true, that sometimes you're leveling up without having the experience necessary. You know, there are people who are sometimes, you know, at a co-EP level who've never been on a set really, or have never spent time in an edit bay, you
Yeah.
know? So I think both things are true. I think having a smaller room and a smaller order, and for not being there for the entirety of the run, of only being there for, you know, 20 weeks of a room or 12 weeks of a room, you're still getting a lot of experience, but you're not getting, it's not giving you all the tools necessary to be successful fully as a showrunner moving forward. So I think both things are definitely true. And I think, you know, I think there's, we're seeing more representation than ever, and that's an important thing. And it's a thing that is absolutely, you know, happening quite a bit, and I think that's great. But when we're also doing smaller things and people aren't getting the access or getting the time to develop those skills, then we're not setting up the next generation necessarily for being as successful. So then sometimes, you know, from a showrunner standpoint, like, yeah, I'm hiring people that just don't have the skills. So then it's the smaller room, you feel that more, right?
Right. Yeah.
And also that's not what, you know, in a larger room, people can learn by osmosis, learn just by watching. But, you know, when it's a larger room, you just need to have more accountability. You need to have more like just home run hitters. You can't have a lot of people who are just on the DH just kind of watching. So
Right.
that's my bad baseball metaphor, but you get it.
I do.
So
I
I don't
do.
know. I think the paradigm is shifting a lot, but then it's also still the same. Like if you were talent, it's always going to be the same. If you are good at what you do and you are nice and you are hardworking and you actually execute, because so many people just have like a good idea. How many people, you know, on the stream right now, like have something that you're 20 pages into? Like you can't do anything with half a project. You know, no one gives a shit. You know, I try to ascribe to the notion of done being better than good, because you can always make it good later. So, but if you know, the baseline is always the truth. If you're good and nice and talented and continue and repeat, you know, you will be okay. There's going to be different obstacles throughout your career, but those are the things you need to really focus on.
Absolutely. I want to circle back to this comment and just the idea that I don't know what all of that is. Maybe that's a faulty emoji somewhere in the middle there. I don't know what that would be. But speaking of being nice and etiquette, when you do have a project that you're working on that you want to share with people, or potentially people who are in the next realm of what you want to do, people you are punching up toward, the etiquette of knowing that you can only pull that trigger once, right? If I'm going to say, hey, Steve, I'd love it if you read this script, it's not this one and the other 7 that I have, and I'm going to just give you all of them. It's like, if I'm doing you a favor, right?
Yeah.
You can pull that trigger once, and then that person will likely dictate what the relationship is from there. No?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my big pet peeve is I recently I read 2 ideas for things for one of my girlfriend's friends who's looking to get into writing.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to do that. But then, like, you know, I took several hours of my day to write kind of a thoughtful response, and it was like a week and a half before I heard back from her. And it was like a real pet peeve of mine. It's like, motherfucker, I get paid for this.
Yes.
And I'm happy to do it, but just say fucking thank you.
Yeah.
And she did invariably, but just like, don't be that person. You know, like,
if you're
respond
watching,
quickly.
shame.
No, and she's a lovely lady, but what I'm saying is just like, be you know, cognizant of people's time. And
Yes.
if they are going their way to help you, fucking say thank you. Even if they don't help you, even if they don't read, still say fucking thank you. It's so easy. It costs you nothing, you know, and it could cost you a lot to not do it. So yes, I mean, absolutely. Like, you know, if you have somebody you think they're going to read, pull that trigger once. If they read it, fucking great. And if they like it and they might read other shit, or they might help you and set you up with somebody else. If they don't, or if that's just not their personality, or if they're not in the position or the power to do that, that's fine too. Still say thank you. And if they don't read, still just say thank you. But you're absolutely right. Like, that person will dictate the relationship, right?
Yeah, they'll dictate. Yeah, for sure. And also, do your research. I can't reach out to you when you're show running. I can't be reaching out to you when you've got a project in development. What is the timing? Do I know enough about your projects, have I tasked myself to know if this is a good time to ask? I think that's also another level, if it's possible, right?
Yeah, yes, I agree. I think so, but I also think like just don't go into every like relationship just looking for something. Don't be fucking Machiavellian and have ulterior motives all the time. Like, I think your motive should be like, hey, here's somebody who's cool and smart and maybe does the thing that I want to do. And wouldn't that be nice just to have like somebody like that in my orbit that is like I'm friendly with?
Mm-hmm.
And that can go like a long way into itself. Like, don't
Yeah.
like you can just smell the stink of when somebody wants something from you, you
Yeah.
know. So I think, and that's fine because we all want shit, you know, we all want something more. But I think if you're just going at it with, you know, with earnest sincere motives of like, you seem cool and talented,
Yep.
I would like to be around that, or I would like to someday be like that. I
Mm-hmm.
think that is going to get you so much further than be like, hey, you're cool, I also have a lot of ideas, want to help me?
Yes. Yeah.
You know, I just think it's just not as good of a way to govern. But I think there's been times in the past where I could have definitely been gone, you know, gotten to bat for myself more, or been more of a seller, or you know, there's a fine line to draw. But mostly,
Sure.
you know, you just want to surround yourself by people who you're inspired by. And I think,
Absolutely.
pardon me, if you do that without having this kind of used car salesman ulterior motive to you,
Yeah.
then you'll fare better.
Yep, absolutely. We talk about that at the festival a lot and try to circulate that mentality in the Institute of not coming to the table with your hand out, right? Coming to the table to say, hey, let's
Yeah.
learn about what you do. Tell me what's exciting. Oh my God, I do yoga too. Oh, you also have a dog? Oh, did we just lose you? That's amazing. Well, for those at home, it's a good thing to know that if you can prevent yourself from being transactional, hey there, welcome back. If you
Sorry,
can prevent
something
yourself,
happened.
no, it's okay, if you can prevent yourself from approaching it in a transactional way. Hi, my name is, and I need from you, as opposed to like,
Yes.
what can I offer? How can I be of service? Like, we have great people in common. Great to meet you. And sometimes those things take a long time to steep. I've heard stories before where someone said, oh, I read this thing and it wasn't right for the project we were working on. But a year and a half later, somebody said, I need a journalist. And I went, you know what? I remember so-and-so's script. That person has a journalist background. Be
Yeah.
patient, right?
Yeah.
What do you think in terms of how you know when the writing is ready and when it needs tuning up? Now, this would be something independent if you're working on a pilot. How do you know when your pilot, your new idea is ready and when it needs punching up?
I mean, I think a lot of it is instinctual,
Mm-hmm.
um, but sometimes it takes a while to hone those instincts. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So I think beyond that, then that's why it behooves you to have a group of a cadre of people that you can kind of go to and be like, you know, not a ton, because that will, you don't want too many cooks, because then you're
Mm-hmm.
just kind of, it's another way of procrastinating, just like constantly
Yeah.
just like getting more notes and more notes, opposed to actually, you know, jumping out into the world. But I think to have like, you know, two, three, four people that you really trust, and if they reflect like, I think this is really good, then, and if your instinct is that as well, then I think it's, you know, worth taking it to the next level,
Mm-hmm.
whatever that level may be. If that's, you know, to your previous point, like, hey, I have this one kind of friend who's in a position of access in some capacity, maybe this is the time to give it to them.
Mm-hmm.
Or I want to now send it to festivals and competitions and see if I can get any traction that way.
Yeah.
Then I think, you know, I think that's when it's ready. Trust your own instincts and have like, again, going back to like the first thing we talked about, like a few people that you really trust. And if they are kind of saying like, yes, I also reflect what your instincts are, then great, take that next swing.
Yep. That's awesome. What about when it's a joke that's not working, a particular beat? How do you diagnose and solve the problem? Or where do you normally look first?
Um,
It might be case by case, but just in terms of, I know as an editor, editors that I've
mhm.
spoken to have often said, like, if there's a gap, if there's a lack of continuity, follow the story over the continuity of the shot. If you have to make a choice between those two, would you
Yeah,
jettison the joke over following the story and the character?
yes. I mean, there's oftentimes that you've got a great joke that um, cannibalizes something else, or does, you know, some kind of a character assassination in some regard. It might be like a
Mhm.
very funny joke, but if it's if it doesn't work for your story, ultimately it doesn't work. I
Yeah.
mean, but there's also like different, it depends on what your tone is. If you're doing something that is like the Zucker brothers, it's like a Naked Gun where it's just like, 5 jokes a minute, then it probably doesn't matter as much. You're just going for the
Hmm.
funniest thing you got on the page. Um, I mean, when does it, how do you know if it's not working? I mean, I think that's just a story thing, really. I mean, obviously, if you're writing a comedy and it's not like some nuanced kind of dramedy, um, it should be funny, at least in some capacity.
Yeah, if it
And
doesn't make you or your friends laugh, we're already sunk.
yeah, I think so. And even if it's a dramedy, like those bits that are the levity, they should still bring a smile.
Yeah.
Um, I think in general, I try to like think of my writing as like, I want it to be as fast and as fast to read as possible. I want it to be a fucking smooth river stone, like just the water passes over it. I
Yeah.
think that's what you should be looking for, because anything that takes a reader out of it, that pauses them to give question or gives them an opportunity to like, now I'm not that interested. I look at my phone. You just want to keep it as quick and as have as much momentum as possible.
Hmm.
And if you do that, I think people are just going to be more engaged in the world that you're creating. And if us, and on top of that, if you're also like having a couple of jokes in there that really, actually make somebody more than smile and kind of laugh, God, I mean, that's a dream.
Yeah.
So I don't know if a joke's not working. I mean, you just have a solid story first, but also, I've read things that maybe the third act kind of falls apart,
Hmm.
or maybe even the premise is like whatever, but I can tell that they have a great sense of
Yep.
joke writing or a great sense of just even setting tone. I think a lot of people, once really when you get into like a lot of sitcom rooms, you're just you're trying to just do like economy of time and speed for so much. So like your action lines become like, well, he enters the room carrying a hat.
Yep.
You're just kind of to be as quick and as much as possible, because you're like kind of getting in there and like, margin fucking it so you can get up to 32 pages or whatever your things are. So,
Great
you're
term.
not doing anything. Yeah, you're not being that loquacious when you're writing, and like you're not
Yeah.
focusing on the elegance. But when you do something on your own, I like to try to just set up a tone and even put jokes in the action lines if they serve the story and if they can
Hmm.
add clarity. You don't want to write a novel in your action lines, because that's nobody wants to see that.
No.
But I think you just want to make the whole thing be as engaging as possible, especially early on, in the first 5 pages, because if somebody else is reading it for the first time who's not your friend and they don't know anything about you, or that's that one big ask, or it's a festival or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of times people don't make it past 5 pages if you don't grab them, or if
Yeah.
there's just like a bunch of errors, or it's not formatted correctly. Like all those things are just will make it dead in the water. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
It's so true though. And I think like there is something to be said for, can you zoom out? Can you zoom out and see if you could substitute something else? You should have 5 other options that you could throw in. What about this? What about that? Or can
mhm.
you zoom out and see what happens if you take that out and you keep it moving? Does the story, does it still
Well,
serve the momentum of the story, right? And keep it funny for you that way.
yeah, I mean, I think ultimately, whenever I'm writing a pilot, I mean, my process usually is, or writing anything, um, if it's personal or for a studio or a network or whatever, um, I'll go through and try to make it as sound as possible. But then invariably, when I give it to my 2 or 3 people, and if in success, you give it to more people, but 2 or 3 people, I'll go through and I will bold stuff like, hey, here's an area that this joke's fine. I think we could use something here. Or this area just feels
Right.
like a little bit slow. Just anything. And if you have any thoughts in this area, and that's when you like, again, lean into those core peoples more, because then
Yep.
you can kind of be like, what else you got here? And
Yeah.
that's, you would do the same thing. And that's when like, hey, this buddy is great at jokes. This
Yep.
person is, fine at jokes, but better at story, whatever it is. But I
Yeah.
think that's like a good step in the process. And that's also early on in your career. You'll probably, if you're lucky enough to get there, you'll do a lot of shit like that for pilots. They'll bring people in to help. So like a
Hmm.
post a table read or post a run through, um, just to come in and be like, pitch some jokes. And that's not a thing that you get paid to do, but it's a thing that builds camaraderie and can potentially, in theory, like if that goes well, maybe somebody hires you on that job if it gets picked up.
Yeah.
So I think another thing is that whenever I encounter some people who are younger or just don't have as much experience or access, there's a lot of being precious about ownership.
Yes.
Or being precious about cash or whatever. No one's trying to fucking steal your ideas.
Yeah.
They're not. They really aren't, because they still have to do the work, and nobody wants to do the work. You may have a great idea, but a great idea is nothing if it's not executed. It truly is fucking nothing.
Yep.
Like Vince Gilligan often said that if he knew that weeds existed, he would have never done Breaking Bad, because it's kind of too close. But he didn't know it existed. And like, how wildly different are those shows? Tonally, critically, performance wise, like they're so wildly different. So execution is everything. So don't be precious about your shit. You will find out, like, if you write something, you will realize you're onto something good if people offer to help.
Yep.
And don't be worried about like people's. What's that?
I said, if you take that ego out of it, it feels like it's just, what about this? What about this? What about this? And fail forward.
Yeah, and whatever you think your idea is and however amazing it is, I guarantee it's been done before in some way, shape, or form. And either successfully or unsuccessfully. Like, don't just fucking take that out of it. It's about what you bring to it. So people can't steal that, So just don't be precious about, I don't want to tell anybody this because this is really good. Like, no one gives a fuck. Right. And if you do that, it makes me be like, you don't know what you're talking about. You have no idea, and this is a waste of my time.
Yeah. We did have one person tag onto that to say, how does someone put themselves out there for those joke pitch sessions? They used to do something like this on an MTV show eons ago.
I think initially it depends on where you are in the world. If you're in Boston or if you're in Minneapolis or you're in New York, I think that's just really creating a community of people who are doing something similar. If you are here, then you just, a lot of times that's either knowing someone who is successful or is, has a little bit of traction, and they will maybe ask you to help out. And that's another reason, just like, surround yourself by people who you think are talented, not for Machiavellian reasons, but because it will make you better. And it'll also, lead to these opportunities. And then it's, the shitty thing about starting a career is that you kind of do need agents and managers, and I still have all that shit. I still have so many people I pay, and oftentimes they don't do much because the job never gets easier. You always have to hustle. There's like this, I think, like a misnomer, like when you get older, the more success you have, the more traction you have, it becomes easier. No, it fucking doesn't. You might know more people, so you don't need to rely. Like, I haven't sent a thing to agents and managers asking for notes or thoughts in forever. I've sent a thing like, here it is. What do we think is a good place for this? How do we think we should sell this? But that comes with like, I don't need your thoughts. I have friends who do this very successfully who've given their thoughts. They are actual writers. You were a seller. You're a salesman. Yes. Tell me how we can sell this. So, but early on, you need to take those thoughts. You need to because then you need to get people invested in your work. Yep. So it's a shitty thing when you're starting off, but oftentimes you're starting off. So, as much as they may not be writers themselves, they read a lot more and they do know what's working. So, and you probably don't have enough people in your life or enough experience in your life to know better than them. So you do need to listen, and it's also like a good time just to learn. So I don't even know what the fuck the question was. How do you put yourself in that position? Just write a bunch and reach out to people who you think are talented and make those friends, and also eventually try to put yourself in a position to have a manager or an agent or whatever who can also give you access to something like that.
Yep. And to underscore your point, I really think that taking that ego out of it is so essential. I had a wonderful opportunity to do a play that was a world premiere of a comedy, and it was with somebody who was like a primetime kind of comedy celebrity, somebody that someone knew was directing, or that people knew was directing. And I felt very proud of having booked that job, but then it was also my opportunity to be the most humble in the room, to like go, great, I made it over that hurdle, and now that I'm in the room, I can do my thing. And he would let me go as a director for a while, and then I could turn and be like, what's funny? What am I missing? What's funny? And to be able to just glean that information from somebody who has done the work, and humble myself to not worry about who made it funny for the show every night, right? I don't have to be territorial about it. I'm glad that I made that hurdle, but at the same time, now can I be of service to the show more than to my own ego in that moment?
Yeah, and I think that's a great thing to also just be cognizant of. You know, it's a thing that happens like earlier on in your career, like whenever you're in a room, if you're lucky to get to that position, you will end up being more precious again about like, well, that was my joke, and your joke counting, and like you want to get laughs, and like, yeah, you should always want to get laughs, you should always want to put your best foot forward, but nobody, at the end of the day, nobody's really fucking paying attention to who got what jokes in. No. They just know if you're good. They can tell if you're pitching something that is working, but like, you don't need to be like, that was my joke. And like, you just fucking, again, just let it be the twig in the hands of a mighty river and just do your job.
Yeah.
Like, people will notice if you're good or not.
It's like, people, they Steve, don't know 65, Nikki, 2. Like, it doesn't, no one's counting. No. If we both worked on the project.
There are some Machiavellian, tyrants out there in the past. I know have done that, but by and large, that's not the case. We're just trying to get it done so we can all go home and have a glass of whiskey or whatever the fuck.
Yeah, exactly. Cheers to that. I want to just address Ed's question here. If I have a multi-season comedy that's already written and I made a 2-hour pilot, who do I punch up to if I'm unknown? That's a complex question.
It is a complex question. I guess my first question is, why is it a 2-hour pilot, Ed? That sounds like just a feature, man. So there's that, but I don't, outside of understanding the context of what you're working on with,
right.
I think this is a great place to be. This is your surrounding. This is an environment where there's other people who are like-minded like you, who are looking for tips and also are driven clearly like you have been. I mean, because again, without knowing anything about it, you've still done work, right? And you still, a lot of people don't do that, so execution is a very important thing. And beyond that, again, put yourself here. Who is also in the comment section here, who is continually showing up to these things, and reach out to them and be like, hey, do we jive? Are we close together? Can we start a writers group? Because we're all wherever you are. If you're in Minneapolis or, or LA or New York or Boston or Chicago, find people who are like-minded around you, and fine tune that, and also try to learn the most, as much as possible. I think like these things, when you are an unknown and you're trying to learn shit, like this festival, and I don't know what Austin does script writing, and there's Sundance does script. There's like all these different labs. Those are great places to try to meet other people, and also people who have more experience that can guide you and push you in the right direction.
Right. You can submit to contests and festivals and get feedback. There are certain ones that include that, like you can add that as an add-on to get notes from industry professionals. We also have a mentorship program that we're about to roll out a new chapter of that. So if it's the kind of thing where you're very specific to where you are and your work is ready, we can also try to see if there's someone who can help you learn and see what tweaks you need to make. But of course, any of the classes we offer are always trying to move everyone in that direction of being able to start to diagnose, start to be able to get in the habit of revising and kind of pare things down and get in alignment with the industry standards.
Yeah.
What is your personal, what is your personal process for revising a script, and how does that change in collaboration? So if you had a pilot that you were working on, how would you normally approach that versus working on it in the room?
I mean, in the room, you're just kind of, you're kind of going with, what whoever is at the top of the food chain, what they're kind of saying, whoever the showrunner is, whoever the writer of the episode is. But you're also taking notes from a bunch of different people, and you're putting together a game plan of how we can rework this and how we can make this better and sharper and, funnier, and make the story track more emotional, all those things. By yourself, it's still the same shit in terms of revising. I am, by and large, kind of a little bit lazy in that regard. Like, I think that's my Achilles heel in terms of writing. Like I'll get locked into an idea and it's hard for my brain to shift sometimes. But because of that, I try to like make things as good as possible. Some people will just do like a vomit draft and let's get it out there and then get some thoughts and rework. And some people love doing that and love doing the rework. But I think that's harder if you're looking for people to constantly read, because that gets tiresome. But also, I try to make it as good as possible so I don't have to do drastic overhauls, because those drastic overhauls, they can be incredibly helpful, but they can also be very demoralizing. So,
Yeah.
I don't know. I just try to. Some people also, I have a very old friend of mine who will just like start writing, and that's it. They'll just start writing, and then they'll eventually know where the ending is.
Yeah.
I used to kind of be like that, or I know the beginning and I know where I was going to, right? And then just kind of go from there and just start writing and kind of like, occasionally check in on like where I am, like page count. This is more of a feature thing, less of a pilot thing. And the pilot thing, like where, page count in terms of an act break, we have to have all those things in mind. But the older I get, the more I tend to outline more.
Yeah.
Just because I think it's sometimes I find it ominous to just like stare down the blinking cursor on an FDX draft. So I think for me, it's a little bit better to have, this is a boho, a kind of a bougie thing, but it's better for me to write a 12-page outline and then give it to a friend of mine or a younger kid who is a writer's assistant or wants some experience. Give them a couple $100, put it in Final Draft for me. And then when you open up Final Draft, you already have something that's 20 pages long. And it just it feels less ominous. It's just like a little brain hack. And then you can kind of also, if you do that and you're not the one also translating it and putting it into Final Draft, it kind of feels when you open it like you're looking at somebody else's bad writing and you can figure out how to fix it out and you're less precious about it. So I don't know. I mean, there's no one right way to do things. I think your method will change as you get older. Oftentimes to the better, sometimes to the worse, but you just have to. There's no one way to do this, and I think a lot of times when I talk to people on the phone, within like 30 seconds, I can usually tell like, do you really care about this? Or are you calling me like, can I have job? But then there's just nothing. There's no sexy advice, because it's really just about like, you just got to do it, and then you got to do it again, and the one may not be bad, may not be good, but that'll get you to the next one that'll be a little better and a little better. And you can't just like do one thing and then think that that's the fucking thing, because even if people like that, a lot of times they're going to be like, great, what else do you have? So you always have to be just like I had one of my first managers said, and I've said this definitely before, but like think of your career as like a stovetop, and you need to have every burner on, with a pot on every burner all the time, and you need to be like looking over those 4 burners and always stirring them and salting them, because you never know what's going to boil over first. And once one is done, take it off and put another another pot on there, because you can't just like put all your eggs in one basket. I mean, you can, and maybe you get lucky, but I don't think that's the way. I think I've had a couple of friends who have in passing or longer times have like done some work with like a Steven Spielberg or somebody like that. And there's a lot of people who are just, the 0.1% of the most successful in the industry. And I think usually the case is that they have 1,000 ideas, a day. And honestly, 950 of them may be trash. But that's the thing, is like that they have 50 that are fucking great. That gets them to the next level. So you can't just like always be, I mean, you're doing yourself a disservice if you have 1,000 ideas and you don't work on any of them. But, I have a notes file in my phone that I've been keeping for the last 10 years. That's like legit 100 and 200, 300 ideas. And I write them down all the time, and sometimes they're nothing. Sometimes they end up being something. Sometimes they end up being a kernel of one thing that I mesh with another thing, that you do this wuzzling that creates, something else. So, I don't even remember what the fuck the question was, honestly. Sorry, I'm just talking.
No, it's great. But it was talking about kind of revising and also just not locking yourself into your one precious idea. I've heard people say before, I think it was Brent Coble, who mentioned it to us, but kind of, are you an idea factory or an idea warehouse? Like, are you the place where there's
Right.
your font of ideas and there's constantly new things and you can let some of them go? Or do you only make one thing and you need, for the success of your business, for that one thing to be tremendously successful? That's a more difficult business model to follow.
Yeah, and I mean, look, I think I think that's a very astute thing to say, but I also think like you can have your one thing if like you get traction in writing horror. Fucking yeah, if you want to branch out and you want to do a comedy and that kind of thing, but also don't lose sight of the thing that made you successful. You know what I
Oh,
mean?
for sure.
So you can have under that umbrella, you can have a lot of different different ideas that are still in the same genre or still in the same space.
Yeah. Not like, here's my one show and it's Gollum with the ring, but like actually,
Mm-hmm.
I've got several ideas in multiple different stages and I can take them forward.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, what's your advice for efficiently interpreting notes and changing jokes on the fly when you do get to set, if you do get to set, those who do?
Um, I mean, interpreting notes. I think as much as I said earlier, like I can be very stubborn, but it does you a disservice to do that whilst getting notes. Like,
Yeah.
I think a lot of times it just, I saw a thing from Mel, quote from Mel Brooks today because it's his birthday, and just talking about like, the thing I learned early on is just say yes to every note. You don't have to fucking do it, but say yes. Or just say like, I've had showrunners and friends who just said like, ooh, yeah, we'll take a look at that. Just something to be like, you are giving credence to it. And a lot of times, sometimes it might be fucking dumb and you're not going to do anything about it. And a lot of times there's like, okay, well, I think there's 5 notes here and 3 of them I think are ridiculous, but these 2, okay, we'll do something around it. Or sometimes it's just as simple as just like making someone feel heard and like, hey, this character feels too broad. Then you just kind of just tweak it a little bit so you still keep the essence of what you like and what you think makes it successful, but makes somebody else feel heard.
Yep.
I think that's a lot of it in terms of directing and in terms of writing and producing. Just make people feel like they have a voice.
Yep.
And also like don't even just do it just to give lip service. A lot of times, when they feel like they have a voice and you're not doing it just because you're trying to assuage or appease people, you get a better product because then they
Mm-hmm.
feel like they have agency. Then feel they have ownership. Like when I was talking
Right.
about ownership earlier. Yes, if it is your project in a pilot or is something that you've directed, yeah, it's yours. But if everybody else feels like it's partially theirs too, it's going to be better. People are going to work harder.
Yep.
If it's an actor, if it's a gaffer, a production designer, a producer.
Mhm.
So pick your battles. There's certain things that you should fall on your sword for, and there's
Yeah.
other things that you can just kind of be like, okay, let's think about that. And a lot of times, if you just kind of have a very thoughtful response that's not antagonistic, a lot of times people will just be like, they just want to see that you've thought it through or they've had an idea. I think a lot of times I sat down with a buddy of mine who's a director who's made a bunch of movies before I made my first movie. And I was like, just be like, what do you do when you feel like a hack? And he's like, oh, all the time. But the thing that I always come back to is that I know this story better than anybody else on the set.
Mhm.
And that is oftentimes like, a calming thing to come back to. It's a mantra of sorts. So, if you just know that, if you know that you know things more than anybody else, and if somebody gives a note that you disagree with, you can just kind of thoughtfully and hopefully with some levity say why that doesn't necessarily work for the story,
Yep.
or say like that's interesting, that might be tougher over here, but let me think about it.
Yep. Right.
I think if um, some people, I don't know. Did I answer the question? Changing jokes on the fly, just be good at it. I don't know.
I think
Just
so.
be good at
Yeah.
like just be I think that's another thing to like have a bunch of friends like do alts on shit so you work that muscle so you can just like take one joke area, like here's a thing, this is bolded, I want to come up with 5 jokes for this,
Right.
and
Absolutely.
sometimes it's the exact same construction just using different specifics. Other times it's just a whole other area, you step it out a ton.
Yeah.
So just work that muscle as much as possible because then you'll be good at changing jokes on the fly. And some people are just incredibly gifted. I worked on a pilot once, my buddy's pilot, and we were all a bunch of very, seasoned joke writers and writers in general and comedians were working on one area, and this other supremely talented motherfucker just like rewrote the whole scene in his head. And some people, you'll come across people who do that, and it's kind of like, well, that's interesting. But by
Okay.
and large, just keep on working on the thing that you're good at. Just work those muscles, and they will come in handy.
Yeah, I mean, the only if you know your piece as well as
Mhm.
you ought, and you have the autonomy within the situation to be able to advocate for it, then if anything, it just more deeply roots your understanding of the characters to be able to say no if you need to, or to say, oh, thank you for that, but this is a conflict. Or it gives you an opportunity and does make it better by filtering it through that lens of how people are seeing it. Oh, did you not see this part? Oh, okay, well then I'll amp that up over here. Thanks for the note, right? That it's
Right,
always hopefully toward making it better. Because if you ask for notes, or if you're in a situation where there are notes to be given, you will get them. You just need to figure out which ones you have to take and which ones
Yeah.
you can sift through. And I think
Yeah.
I think of it in terms of, even on the acting side of things, someone could give you a note for a particular scene. Well, I need you to be louder. I need you to yell. And you're like, what's the note behind the note? The note behind the note is, I need you to raise the stakes. I need it to be more important to you. I need you to ramp up your intention. Oh, I can do that, as opposed to just yelling for the sake of yelling, right? So it's a similar thing. You don't want to do the note for the sake of the note. You want to kind of see if you can diagnose the note behind the note sometimes, just because not everybody in the position to give them always knows how to give the one to you specifically, right? For how
No,
you work as an
absolutely.
artist.
I mean, sometimes everybody, even people who are very skilled, sometimes it's hard to articulate what exactly is not working.
Mm-hmm.
But people can usually point to an area. So sometimes, even if what they're saying in their note is not perhaps correct, like what you just said,
Yeah.
you may just need to look at it anyways. There's something that is snagging. There's something that is causing them to slow the read, slow the watch, slow the performance, whatever.
Mm-hmm. And if you're deft enough at it, you can then ask a question, right? You could say, oh, does it feel like it's lagging there in momentum? Does it feel like it's,
Yep.
Losing importance? Is it sagging in terms of the stakes? Hopefully you develop, like you said, that muscle of having the conversation without being sensitive to it as a judgment, but that it's meant to be prescribed as an improvement. And how can you get there in a way that serves your vision as well as their needs, either on the buyer side or, the producing side, whatever that is. I would love to just ask one last question, which is, how do you personally lean into your strengths as a writer in the room? What do you think your strengths are, and how do you get to lean into them in a room?
I don't know. I think
that's it, folks. And we're done.
Yeah, no, but I think it's just like it's whatever your opinions on Bill Murray may be. I think there's something he said forever ago was just try to be as relaxed as possible at all times. And I think, if you are harkening back to something I said 15 minutes ago, worried about who said what and who got, people notice that shit. So you don't have to worry about that. Just try to bring as much as yourself to it. If you have a lot of anxiety, which you're going to on a first job or a new job, but if you can come in just feeling confident in your own abilities and not overthink, which is, it will take a while to get to that, but to be confident in your own abilities, but also not bring ego into it. And also, especially on a first job, be content to sit and learn and not over speak and not talk over people and not blow things up without fixes. If you ever have a thought or a note, don't just say this doesn't work. Nobody fucking likes that. Say something like, this doesn't work, and I don't think this works, but what if it was like this? Just come in again, I think it's the first thing we talked about, but make whoever's show it is, whoever your boss is, make their life easier. And the best way for you to do that is to, be prepared. Don't have a laissez-faire attitude. A lot of it is just responding to things on the fly. So if you're skilled enough, sometimes you can get by with just kind of, pitching jokes in the moment, kind of pitching story fixes. And sometimes I have been lucky enough to do that, and other times I have, not. So, if you're coming dressed to play, it's always going to be better. So, feel good about whatever you're working on. If it's a new script that came in, and you're doing a rewrite, just have Reddit, have some jokes already ready to go. Yeah, so I think, I think it's just good to know what your skills are, feel confident in it, and don't have a ton of ego. Don't take things personally. I've also worked with people who definitely take things personally, and that gets in their head. And, sometimes people can be dicks, but also a lot of times I'm coming just from a comedy room standpoint. There's like a lot of sarcasm, and there's a lot of, so like, don't, everybody, I think there's good life advice. Good stuff, Steve.
Good voice.
Good life advice.
Life
Yeah,
advice.
yeah.
All right.
Life advice in general is like, everybody's too concerned with their own shit to really think about what you're doing. So, give people the benefit of the doubt, and you never know what somebody else is going through. Just try to help out as much as you can, and, be relaxed and confident in your own abilities without egotistical.
That's perfect. Be of service, be kind, and trust what you're there to do. And it's such a collaborative, television specifically is such a collaborative team sport that I feel like, to think that any of us, even the Aaron Sorkins of the world, have a team, right? They have
Absolutely
people around them. It's not just that they're an island and they get to do it all by themselves. So I think you can relax into that. I love the idea of that energy of just kind of not casual in terms of work ethic, but just relaxing into like, okay, I'm on the team, or I want to be part of the team. And if I have certain assets at the table, then so does Steve, and so does this person, and so does this person. So like, we all get to pitch in and to make this better. And that's all we're here to do. So we don't need to be worried about keeping a tally of how many times does so-and-so win the argument, or how many times does so-and-so have the solution, if we're all part of the engine.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's going back to a sports analogy, there's always going to be a cleanup hitter, and there's going to be somebody, everybody's the different strengths. There's a reason why there's relief pitchers and starting pitchers. Like, just because somebody's a strength in another way doesn't mean that you don't have value. So, champion the people, support the people who are better than you, and try to support the people who are learning, Be nice, be grateful. That's it.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Steve. I love all of that. And for anybody watching, we've got new classes coming up. We've got a trio of classes coming up. The Art of Giving and Receiving Feedback, Good Bones, which is all about pilot structure and building that for success, as well as Breaking Story, the basics to that. So you can check it out right there at catalyststories.org/classes-events. And Steve, we always love having you here. Thank you so much. And look forward to seeing you off of the picket line and back in the room soon. Yeah.
One of these days, who knows?
One of these days. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Well, it's lovely talking to you, Nikki. Good luck to everybody.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.